I didn't catch him cheating. I didn't find secret texts. I simply reached for my husband, and he stepped back like my hands were poison. He looked at me and said, "Don't touch me. I'm not playing husband tonight." So I stopped begging. I stopped arguing. Instead, I started doing what I do best. I began building an exit strategy that he never saw coming. My name is Eloise Gray, and I remember the exact moment my marriage died. It was not when we signed the papers or when the judge banged the gavel. It was not even when he moved his boxes out of the garage. It was the moment my heart simply stopped beating. Suspended in a chest that had suddenly turned to ice, I am 41 years old, and by trade, I am a creature of logic. I work as a senior risk control specialist and fraud investigator for Westmark Integrity Group. My entire career is built on the premise that people lie, but data does not. I look at spreadsheets, expense reports, and insurance claims, and I find the cracks where the truth is hiding. I am paid to see what others miss. I am paid to notice when the numbers do not add up, when a story is too perfect, or when a pattern shifts by a fraction of a degree. I have spent 2 decades dissecting the anatomy of deception for major corporations, yet it took me 12 years to realize I was living inside the biggest fraud of my life. My husband was Derek Vaughn. He was 43 years old, and to the outside world, he was perfect. Derek was a man who knew how to wear a suit like a second skin. He knew how to tilt his head just so when listening to a boring story at a dinner party to make the speaker feel fascinating. He was a performer. That is the only word that fits. In public, he was the devoted partner, the charmer, the man who held doors and laughed at the right decibel level. But inside our 4 walls, the performance ended. At home, Derek treated affection like a tax he was trying to evade. He treated intimacy like a chore he could procrastinate on. We had been married for 12 years. It was not a loud marriage. We did not throw plates or scream until the neighbors called the police. It was a quiet drowning, for more than a decade. I carried the invisible load that keeps a life running. I managed the financial planning. I filed our joint taxes. I researched the best insurance premiums. I called the plumbers when the pipes leaked. I remembered his mother's birthday and bought the card he would sign without reading. I was the architect of his comfort. I built a world where he never had to worry about a late fee or a scheduling conflict. I thought this was partnership. I thought this was how you loved someone, by clearing the path in front of them so they could walk without stumbling. I was wrong. I was not his partner. I was his manager. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were always brutal at Westmark. I had spent 10 hours auditing a suspicious logistics chain, staring at screens until my eyes burned. My head was throbbing with a tension headache that started at the base of my skull and wrapped around my forehead like a vice. It was raining when I drove home, the kind of gray, miserable sleet that makes the bones ache. All I wanted was to walk through the front door, take off my heels, and feel a moment of human warmth. I wanted to be held. It was such a small, pathetic request. I just wanted my husband to wrap his arms around me for 5 seconds so I could breathe. I unlocked the front door. The house was warm. Derek was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the granite island I had paid for, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered. He did not smile. He did not ask how my day was. He just watched me, his face a blank canvas. I dropped my bag on the counter and walked toward him. I was so tired. I did not say anything. I just reached out. My hands were open. I moved into his space, intending to rest my head on his shoulder, to steal a little bit of comfort from the man I had pledged my life to. Derek stepped back. It was not a flinch. It was not a startled reaction to a sudden movement. It was deliberate. It was precise. He took one smooth step backward, creating a chasm of air between us. He looked at my outstretched hands with a curling lip, as if I were covered in mud, as if I were something dirty that would stain his freshly pressed shirt. I froze. My hands were still hovering in the air, grasping at nothing. He looked me dead in the eyes, his expression cold and bored, like a man clocking out of a shift he despised. "Don't touch me," he said. His voice was flat. I'm not playing husband tonight. The silence that followed was deafening. It sucked the air out of the room. The refrigerator hummed. The rain tapped against the window pane. But inside my head, everything went silent. I'm not playing husband tonight. The words hung there, vibrating in the space between us. He did not say he was tired. He did not say he was angry. He said he was not playing. He admitted, in plain English, that it was a role, a costume he put on when it suited him and took off when it became inconvenient. I stood there, my hands slowly dropping to my sides. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. I saw the arrogance in his jawline. I saw the contempt in his eyes. I saw a man who believed he was untouchable because he thought I was desperate. He thought I would cry. He thought I would beg. He thought I would ask him what was wrong, apologize for needing him, and scramble to fix whatever imaginary slight I had committed. He was waiting for the emotional outburst so he could roll his eyes and call me dramatic, but I did not cry. I did not scream. Instead, a switch flipped in my brain. It is the same switch that flips when I find a discrepancy in a ledger. It is the click of a lock engaging, the heat drained out of my body, replaced by a crystalline clarity. My heart rate slowed down. The headache vanished, replaced by the sharp, cold focus of an investigator looking at a crime scene. I looked at Derek Vaughn, and I no longer saw my husband. I saw a liability. I saw a bad investment. I saw a hostile entity in my secure zone. I straightened my spine. I smoothed the front of my blazer. When I spoke, my voice was terrifyingly soft. It did not sound like the voice of a wounded wife. It sounded like the voice of a risk assessor delivering a final verdict. "Then," I said, holding his gaze without blinking, "that is the most honest thing you have ever said." Derek blinked. He looked slightly confused, as if he had misread the script. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to double down on his cruelty, but I had already turned away. I walked past him. I did not stomp. I did not slam a door. I moved with the efficiency of a machine. I felt a coldness spreading through my mind, a beautiful, numbing frost. It was the feeling I got when the data finally aligned and the fraud was exposed. There was no confusion anymore. There was no ambiguity. The evidence was irrefutable. He had told me the truth. He was not playing husband, and if he was not playing husband, then I was no longer under any contract to play the wife. As I walked toward the hallway, leaving him standing alone in the kitchen, I knew the marriage was over. I did not need a lawyer to tell me. I did not need a counseling session. The risk assessment was complete. The asset was toxic. I was not sad. I was not heartbroken. I was calculating. The time for begging was over. The time for building an exit strategy had just begun. I walked past the master bedroom without pausing. My legs carried me down the hallway to the guest room, a space we jokingly referred to as the neutral zone. And for the first time in 12 years, I turned the lock. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the loudest sound in the house. It did not sound like safety. It sounded like a severance. I did not lock the door to punish him. Punishment implies a desire for correction, a hope that the other person will learn a lesson and return to the fold. I had no such hope. I locked the door to end the performance. If he was not playing husband, I could no longer sleep in the bed of a wife. I lay down on the crisp, unused sheets and expected to cry, but the tears never came. Instead, I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a soldier who has finally been discharged from a war they knew they could not win. The next morning, the house was silent. It was 7 o'clock. This was usually the time I began the choreography of our morning routine. For over a decade, my movements had been synchronized to his needs. I would grind the beans, froth the oat milk, and place his mug on the granite coaster at the head of the island, his spot, so it would be cooling to the perfect temperature the moment he walked in. I went to the kitchen. I ground the beans. The smell of coffee filled the air, rich and familiar. I took down a single mug. I brewed the coffee, black and strong, just the way I liked it. Then, I did something that felt like a desecration of our unwritten laws. I took the steaming mug and placed it squarely on the granite coaster at the head of the island. Derek walked in 3 minutes later. He was buttoning his cuffs, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He moved with the arrogance of a man who expects his world to be exactly where he left it. He reached for the mug without looking, his hand closing around the handle. I stepped forward, picked up the mug from under his fingers, and took a slow, deliberate sip. I sat down on the stool, his stool. I occupied his space. I drank the coffee that sat in his spot. Derek froze. His hand was still suspended in the air, grasping at a ghost. He looked at the empty counter, then at me, sitting in the throne he had claimed for 12 years. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed his face, followed quickly by the familiar mask of irritation. "You are being dramatic," he said. He let out a scoff, a sharp exhalation of air meant to belittle me. "You are making a huge production out of nothing. Eloise, are we really doing this?" He expected me to flush. He expected me to stammer an apology or push the mug back toward him. He expected the shame to work. I set the mug down. The ceramic made a solid thud against the granite. "I am not doing anything," I said. My voice was even, stripped of any inflection. "I am simply respecting your decision. You are not playing husband. I am accepting that reality." "Oh, for God's sake," he snapped, his voice rising. He leaned in, invading my personal space, using his height to intimidate. This was his favorite tactic. He would escalate the volume until I crumbled, until I became emotional so he could point at my tears and call me irrational. He wanted a fight. He needed the noise of an argument to drown out the silence of his own cruelty. I was tired. "Eloise, I had a long day. You are blowing one sentence out of proportion to punish me because you didn't get what you wanted." I looked at him, and I felt absolutely nothing. The fear of his anger was gone. The desperation to please him had evaporated. "There is no punishment. Derek," I said, "punishment requires energy. I have none left for you." I stood up, took my coffee, and walked out of the kitchen. I did not look back. For the rest of the week, the house transformed into a theater where the lead actor had walked off the stage, leaving the supporting characters shouting lines into the void. I went to work on time. I came home on time. But the invisible machinery that kept our domestic life running had ground to a halt. I stopped doing the laundry, his gym clothes piled up in the hamper, a mounting monument to his own incompetence. I stopped managing the calendar. He missed a dental appointment on Thursday because no reminder popped up on his phone. I watched him searching for his keys in the morning, cursing under his breath, panic rising in his chest because I had not placed them in the bowl by the door. I cooked dinner for myself, one portion of grilled salmon, one side of asparagus. I sat at the table and ate in silence. Derek stood in the doorway, staring at my plate. He waited for me to offer to make him something. He waited for me to ask if he was hungry. I chewed, swallowed, and washed my own dish. The silence in the house was heavy, but it was not the comfortable silence of companionship. It was the silence of a held breath. Derek began to hover. He would walk into rooms where I was sitting, sigh loudly, and wait for me to ask him what was wrong. He would pace around the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets with excessive force. He was trying to provoke a reaction. He needed me to ask, why? He needed me to beg for an explanation. He needed me to be the nag, the shrew, the desperate wife so he could resume his role as the long-suffering husband, but I gave him nothing. I did not ask about his day. I did not ask why he was late. I did not ask why he was staring at his phone with a furrowed brow. I simply existed in the same space, moving around him like water flowing around a rock. By Friday, the confusion in his eyes had turned into a low-grade panic. He was losing his audience. He realized that his withdrawal of affection only worked if I was chasing it. When I stopped chasing, he was just a man standing alone in a room, holding a bag of dirty laundry he did not know how to wash. On Friday night, I stood in the bathroom, brushing my teeth. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the fine lines around my eyes. I saw the fatigue that had settled into my skin after years of overfunctioning. But beneath that, I saw something else. I saw a stranger looking back at me, someone I had not met in a very long time. Derek walked past the open door. He paused, looking at me in the glass. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to offer a half-hearted apology, perhaps to start another fight. Then, seeing the utter lack of recognition in my eyes, he closed his mouth and walked away. I rinsed my toothbrush and set it down. I looked at the woman in the mirror one last time. For years, I had been terrified that if I stopped holding everything together, my marriage would fall apart. I had been terrified of losing him. But as I stood there in the quiet house, I realized the truth. I had not lost my husband. You cannot lose something you never truly possessed. I had only lost the illusion that I was loved, and the weight of that illusion lifting off my shoulders felt exactly like freedom. Saturday morning was not spent weeping into a pillow. It was spent with a spreadsheet. I sat at the dining room table, the surface clear of any breakfast clutter, and opened my laptop. The house was quiet. Derek having left early for a golf outing he likely could not afford, leaving me with the silence I required to conduct an autopsy on our financial life. In my line of work, we call this a forensic audit. You strip away the narratives, the excuses, and the emotional justifications, and you look at the raw data. I created a new document and began to list every single point of contact between my life and his. It was a terrifyingly long list: bank accounts, credit cards, the mortgage, the car leases, the insurance policies, the cell phone plan, the streaming services, the gym memberships, the toll tags. I looked at the primary checking account. For 12 years, we had called it our money, but when I clicked on the account details, the truth was staring back at me in black and white pixels. Primary account holder: Eloise Gray. Authorized user: Derek Vaughn. He was not a partner. He was a guest with a debit card. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number on the back of my platinum card. I did not hesitate. When the representative answered, my voice was as crisp as a freshly printed banknote. I need to update the security protocols on my account, I said. I would like to remove an authorized user, effective immediately. Certainly, ma'am, the voice on the other end chirped. Which user would you like to remove? Derek Vaughn. And would you like to issue a new card for yourself to prevent any digital wallet crossover? Yes, I said. And I need to reset the online banking password and enable two-factor authentication. Please link it solely to my personal mobile number and my secure work email. It took 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, I dismantled the financial safety net Derek had been swinging in for over a decade. I did not freeze the assets. I did not drain the funds. I simply revoked his access to the capital I generated. If he wanted to spend money, he would have to use his own. Next came the utilities, the electric bill, the water, the high-speed internet. They were all auto-paid from my personal credit card. I logged into each provider's portal. I did not turn off the power. That would be petty. And I was not being petty. I was being precise. Instead, I removed my payment information. I changed the billing contact email to Derek's address. I left the accounts pending, waiting for a valid payment method. He would receive the notifications. Whether he chose to open them was now his problem, not mine. Then, I moved to the subscriptions: Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, the premium cloud storage for his photo collection, his specialized news subscriptions. All of them were anchored to my credit card. I went down the list like a reaper harvesting wheat. Cancel. Remove payment method. Cancel. I was not destroying his life. I was simply returning it to him. The fallout began on Sunday afternoon. Derek was in the living room, attempting to watch a documentary. I heard the sudden silence as the TV screen went black, followed by the jagged noise of frustration. "Eloise?" he called out, his voice laced with annoyance. "The Netflix is asking for a credit card. Did you change the expiration date again?" I was in the kitchen. Reading a book. I did not look up. No, I said calmly. I canceled the subscription. He walked into the room, the remote control clutched in his hand like a weapon. You did what? Why would you do that? I am cutting back on unnecessary expenses, I replied, turning a page. If you wish to maintain the subscription, you are welcome to enter your own payment information. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. It was a small inconvenience, a minor annoyance, but it was the first crack in the glass. He grumbled something about me being ridiculous and stomped back to the living room. I heard him fumbling with his wallet, presumably typing in his own card details. I smiled. Welcome to adulthood. Derek, the real blow landed on Monday evening. I was already home, preparing a simple salad for myself. When the front door flew open, Derek stormed in, his face a mottled shade of red I had rarely seen. He threw his car keys onto the counter with a violent clatter. My card was declined, he spat out. I continued slicing a cucumber. Which card? The platinum. The joint card. He was shouting now, pacing the length of the kitchen island. I was at the gas station. There was a line behind me. I tried to pay, and the machine screamed declined. I had to use my emergency cash. It was humiliating. What the hell did you do? I set the knife down and wiped my hands on a towel. I turned to face him, my expression completely neutral. It is not a joint card. Derek, it is my card. You were an authorized user. I revoke that authorization. You cut me off? He looked incredulous, as if I had committed a crime against humanity. You can't just cut me off. That is controlling behavior. Eloise, you are using money to control me because you are mad about last week. This is financial abuse. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Control? I repeated. Derek, for 12 years, I have managed every bill, every tax filing, and every saving goal. I have ensured you never had to think about where the lights came from or how the mortgage got paid. That was not control. That was management. And as of today, I am resigning from the position of managing your life. You are my wife, he yelled. You are supposed to support me. And you are my husband, I countered softly. But you made it very clear you are not playing that role anymore. Why should I continue to finance a production that has been canceled? He stood there, breathing heavily, his narrative of victimhood crumbling against the wall of my logic. He had no argument. He had no leverage. He only had his anger, and it was useless here. On Wednesday, I took a half day from Westmark. I did not go to a spa. I drove downtown to a glass-walled building that smelled of expensive leather and billable hours. I sat across from a woman named Evelyn Sharp, a family law attorney with eyes like flint. I did not cry. I did not tell her about my broken heart or the coldness in my bed. I placed a folder on her desk and opened my notebook. I am not here for therapy, I said. I am here for strategy. I have 3 questions. Evelyn leaned forward, interlacing her fingers. Go ahead. First, I said, I need to know exactly how to segregate my future earnings so they are classified as separate property starting today, before any filing is made. Second, I need to understand my liability for any debt he incurs in his own name from this point forward. And third, I need to know the legal standard for preserving digital evidence if I suspect financial infidelity. Evelyn smiled. It was a shark smile, full of professional respect. You have prepared. I am a risk assessor, I replied. I do not like surprises. We spent an hour mapping out the battlefield. She explained the difference between marital assets and separate property. She told me how to document the date of separation to protect my income. She told me exactly what to look for if I suspected he was hiding money. When I got home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. I went into my home office and opened my laptop one last time. I created a new secure folder, password protected and encrypted. I moved the spreadsheet, the bank confirmations, the chat logs of our text messages, and the notes from my meeting with Evelyn into it. I stared at the screen for a moment, the cursor blinking. I needed a name for this new chapter of my life. I typed it out, the letters stark and white against the dark background. Vaughn, exit file. I closed the laptop. The exit strategy was no longer a theory. It was in motion. And Derek, poor Derek, was still trying to figure out why his Netflix password wasn't working. When silence failed to break me, Derek called in the cavalry. It is a standard tactic in the manipulator's handbook. If you cannot control the narrative from the inside, you export the conflict to an external audience who will validate your version of reality. He realized that the Cold War inside our house was not a battle he could win with sulking and slammed doors, so he decided to crowdsource the pressure. The 1st Battalion arrived on a Thursday evening in the form of Marilyn Vaughn. His mother. Marilyn was a woman who weaponized concern. She did not knock. She simply let herself in with the emergency key I had foolishly given her 5 years ago, carrying a Tupperware container of lasagna and a face full of rehearsed pity. She found me in the living room, reading a report on supply chain fraud. "Eloise, darling," she cooed, setting the lasagna down on the coffee table without a coaster. "I just happened to be in the neighborhood. Derek sounded so down when I spoke to him. I thought you two might need a hot meal." I closed my laptop slowly. "Hello, Marilyn?" She sat down opposite me, smoothing her skirt. She had the kind of eyes that assess the dust on your baseboards while asking about your health. "Now look," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know Derek can be difficult. All men are, but he is under so much stress right now. He told me about the tension in the house. He feels like he is walking on eggshells." She leaned forward, reaching for my hand. I did not pull away, but I did not return the squeeze. "You have to be the softer one, Eloise," she said. "Marriage is about compromise. He is proud. You know that. If you just yield a little, if you just stop this, freezing him out, he will come around. You are the rock. You have to absorb the waves." I looked at this woman who had raised a son to believe that women were shock absorbers for male tantrums. I withdrew my hand. "Marilyn," I said, my voice pleasant but firm. "I am perfectly happy to be soft. I am happy to yield and compromise with a husband." I paused, letting the silence settle. "But I will not be soft with a performance. Derek told me explicitly that he was done playing the role. I am simply respecting his resignation." Marilyn blinked, her smile faltering. "Oh, you know he didn't mean it like that. Men say things when they are tired." "I am tired too, Marilyn," I replied. "But I do not treat people like disposable employees." She left 10 minutes later, taking the lasagna with her. The guilt trip had failed. The next assault came from the digital front. Tate, Derek's best friend since college, was a man who still thought fraternity loyalty was a valid moral compass. I received a text message from him on Friday afternoon while I was in a meeting. "Derek says you are icing him out. Says he is sleeping in the guest room and you cut his cards. That is low. L, you are destroying him. He is falling apart." I stared at the screen. I could see the narrative Derek was spinning. He was the victim of a frigid, controlling wife who used money as a weapon. He left out the part where he recoiled from my touch. He left out the part where he called our marriage a game. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving with precision. "He is not falling apart because of me. Tate. He is falling apart because he lost his privileges. There is a difference between suffering and inconvenience." I hit send and blocked the number. I did not have the bandwidth for flying monkeys. By the weekend, Derek realized that social pressure was not going to make me crack. So, he switched to the most dangerous tactic of all. He decided to be nice. It was terrifying to watch. On Saturday evening, I came home to the smell of roasted chicken. The house was clean. There was a bouquet of tulips, supermarket variety. But still, sitting on the island, Derek was wearing a clean shirt. He had shaved. He looked like the man I had married 10 years ago, the man who knew how to charm a room. "I made dinner," he said, offering a tentative smile. "I thought we could talk. Just reset." I sat down. I ate the chicken. It was dry, but I did not complain. I waited for the other shoe to drop. It dropped during dessert. Derek poured me a glass of wine and leaned back in his chair, swirling the red liquid. "Look, Elle," he started, his voice smooth, practicing the cadence of reasonableness. "I know I said some things last week that were harsh, and I'm sorry if they hurt your feelings. If, the favorite word of the unrepentant. But," he continued, and there it was, the pivot. "You have to admit, you have been really intense lately, the way you control the finances, the way you manage every minute of our lives. It makes me feel suffocated. I lashed out because I felt trapped. We both have things to work on. I am willing to forgive the credit card thing if you are willing to admit that you pushed me to that point." I looked at him over the rim of my wine glass. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He had wrapped an accusation in the gift wrap of an apology. He was offering a truce, but the terms required me to accept the blame for his cruelty. "I see," I said quietly. "So?" He smiled, confident that he had won. "Can we go back to normal? I miss us. I miss having a wife." He did not miss me. He missed the service. He missed the bill payer. He missed the woman who made his life frictionless. "I appreciate the dinner, Derek," I said, standing up. "But forgiveness requires a change in behavior, not just a change in tactics." I walked away, leaving him alone with the dirty dishes. The mask slipped completely the next day. I walked into my home office to find Derek rummaging through the filing cabinet. He jumped when he saw me, a folder clutched in his hand. It was the file labeled Retirement Assets. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I was just checking our portfolio," he stammered, his face flushing. "We have that investment account, the one with the tech stocks. I wanted to see how it was performing. I was thinking maybe we should liquidate some of it, for a rainy day fund, since things are weird right now." My eyes narrowed. That account was in my name, funded by my bonuses from before we were even married, though I had foolishly added his name to the beneficiary list. "That is not a rainy day fund," I said. "That is my retirement, and the market is down. Selling now would be idiotic." "It's our retirement," he snapped, the charm from the night before vanishing instantly. "And I have a right to know how much is in there. You hide everything from me. How much cash do we have liquid? What about the savings bond my grandmother gave us?" "Your grandmother gave that to you," I corrected him. "And you cashed it 5 years ago to buy that jet ski you used twice. Do you not remember?" He slammed the drawer shut. "You think you are so smart," he sneered. "You think holding the purse strings makes you the boss. But you can't lock me out of my own life forever." "I am not locking you out, Derek," I said. "I am just securing the perimeter." Later that night, I went down to the garage to check that the side door was locked. It was a habit I could not break. As I approached, I heard a voice. Derek was pacing between the cars, his phone pressed to his ear. The garage door opener light cast long, jagged shadows against the concrete. I stopped. I did not breathe. "It is not working," Derek hissed into the phone. "She is not buying the nice guy act. She is not buying the guilt trip. Mom tried. Tate tried. Nothing." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "I know," he shouted, then lowered his voice to a frantic whisper. "I know the deadline. I'm trying to find the account numbers, but she has changed the passwords to everything. She has the physical files locked up. I can't get to the liquid cash." Another pause. "No," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "She isn't breaking. She isn't crying. She is just cold. It is like looking at a robot. I don't know what to do. If I don't get that money by the 1st of the month..." He trailed off. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. I did not confront him. I did not demand to know who he was talking to or what deadline he was facing. I didn't need to. The data had just updated. I walked back to the master bedroom, the room I no longer slept in, and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. For the first time since that Tuesday night, The corners of my mouth lifted. It was a small, sharp smile. Derek was not just a bored husband. He was a desperate man. And he was not fighting for his marriage. He was fighting for a lifeline. He said I wasn't breaking. He was right. You cannot break something that has already forged itself into steel. The manipulator was panicking, and when a manipulator panics, they make mistakes. I turned off the light, let him scramble in the dark. I had a flashlight, and I was just getting started. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning. Exactly 1 week after I had locked the guest room door, I was sitting at my desk at Westmark, surrounded by the comforting hum of servers and the sterile white noise of a corporate office. It was 10:42 in the morning. My email pinged. It was a standard automated alert from our primary bank, the kind that usually signals a deposit clearing or a statement becoming available. Subject: Action required. Confirmation of your home equity line of credit application. I stared at the screen. The words did not make sense. I blinked, expecting them to rearrange themselves into something logical, like a fraud alert for a gas station purchase or a notification about a policy update. But the words remained static. Home equity line of credit, a HELOC. I had not applied for a home equity line of credit. I had not applied for a loan of any kind since we refinanced the house 4 years ago to take advantage of historically low interest rates. My hand moved to the mouse, not with a tremble, but with the sharp, predatory snap of a trap closing. I opened the email. It was legitimate. It referenced the last 4 digits of my Social Security number. It referenced our home address. It thanked me for my patience during the underwriting process and stated that the disbursement of $150,000 was pending final signature verification. $150,000. The air in my office seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was not a clerical error. In my line of work, we do not believe in coincidences. We believe in patterns. I picked up the phone and dialed the fraud hotline on the back of my debit card. I did not bypass the system. I used it. When the representative, a young man named Joshua, answered, I was already recording the call on my end. My name is Eloise Gray, I said, my voice ice cold. I am looking at an email confirming a loan application I did not submit. I need you to pull up the file immediately. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Okay, Ms. Gray, I see the application here. It was submitted 5 days ago. It looks like it was done in person at our downtown branch. In person, I repeated. And was I there? According to the notes, yes, Joshua said, sounding confused. Both you and your husband, Mr. Derek Vaughn, were present. The loan officer noted that he checked photo identification for both parties. My stomach turned over. A slow, sickening revolution. I was at work 5 days ago. I had been in a 4-hour compliance meeting with the legal department. I could prove my whereabouts down to the second. Joshua, I said, and I let the weight of my job title seep into my voice. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I was not at that branch. I did not sign that application. You are currently processing a fraudulent loan secured by my primary residence. I am formally requesting that you freeze this application, flag the account for identity theft, and initiate a request for the security camera footage from the downtown branch for the date and time in question. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, he stammered. I am freezing it now. I hung up. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not have a plan. I had a plan. I immediately logged into the credit bureau portal. I paid the fee for an instant report. The screen refreshed, and there it was. A hard inquiry dated last Thursday. I looked at the date. Last Thursday. I closed my eyes and rewound the tape of my memory. Last Thursday. Derek had been unusually elevated. He had come home with a bottle of wine, poured me a glass, and asked about my day with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I remembered thinking it was part of his manipulation campaign, his nice guy act. But now I saw the machinery beneath the smile. He hadn't been being nice. He had been celebrating. He thought he had pulled it off. I left the office at 2 o'clock. I told my assistant I had a family emergency. It was not a lie. The emergency was that my family was a crime scene. When I got home, the house was empty. I went straight to the master bedroom closet. Behind the rows of Derek's perfectly pressed shirts, there was a wall safe. It was digital, but it also had a backup key. I kept the key hidden in a hollowed-out book in the library downstairs. I retrieved the key and opened the safe. At first glance, everything looked normal. The stack of documents was sitting on the shelf. But as I reached for them, I noticed the misalignment. I am a woman of precise habits. When I file documents, I align the edges perfectly. I stack them in chronological order. The deed to the house was on top. It should have been at the bottom, beneath the marriage license. The corners were slightly dog-eared, as if someone had shoved them back into the envelope in a hurry. I held the paper up to the light. There was a faint smudge on the margin, a fingerprint. Derek had taken the original deed. He had taken my social security card, and he had taken my passport. He needed the passport to create the fake ID for whoever the woman was that he dragged into that bank to play me. I put the papers back exactly as I found them. I did not scream. I did not throw his clothes onto the lawn. I closed the safe and locked it. In an investigation, you never let the suspect know you have found the smoking gun until you are ready to pull the trigger. I went to the kitchen and began to prepare dinner. I chopped vegetables with a rhythmic, steady cadence. Chop, chop, chop. At 6:30, the garage door opened. Derek walked in. He looked tired, but there was a frantic energy vibrating under his skin. He was still waiting for the money. He probably thought the delay was just bureaucratic red tape. He tossed his keys on the counter and looked at me. He saw me cooking. He saw the domestic scene. He relaxed. Just a fraction. "Hey," he said. "Something smells good?" "Stir fry," I said, not looking up from the peppers. He opened the refrigerator and frowned. "Did you change the Wi-Fi password too? My phone isn't connecting." "Yes," I said. "I changed it this morning." "Why?" He slammed the refrigerator door. The frustration bubbled over. "Why are you doing this, Eloise? First the bank accounts, now the internet. You are acting like a paranoid crazy person. What is the point of all this secrecy?" I stopped chopping. I set the knife down on the wooden board. I turned slowly to face him. I wiped my hands on my apron. "I am not being paranoid, Derek," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "I am being prudent. I changed the passwords because there has been a security breach." "A breach?" He laughed. A nervous, jagged sound. "What are you talking about? Did someone hack your email?" I looked him dead in the eyes. I looked for the pupil dilation. I looked for the twitch in the jaw muscle. "No," I said. "Someone is physically signing my name on documents in rooms I have never entered. Someone walked into a bank downtown last Thursday, pretending to be me, and applied for a loan against this house." The reaction was instantaneous. He didn't say, "What?" He didn't say, "Oh my God, is our identity stolen?" He froze. It was a micro-freeze, lasting less than a second. His breath hitched in his throat. His eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. It was the look of a man who hears the click of a landmine beneath his foot. That 1 second of silence was my confession. That is crazy," he stammered, recovering too late. His voice was a pitch higher than usual. "Are you sure? Banks make mistakes all the time." "I am sure," I said, turning back to the stove to hide the triumph in my eyes. "But don't worry. The fraud department is pulling the security footage. They said the cameras have a clear view of the desk. We will see exactly who was sitting in my chair." I heard him swallow. It was a loud, wet sound in the quiet kitchen. He muttered something about needing to take a shower and practically ran out of the room. I waited until I heard the water running upstairs. Then I opened my laptop again. I had one more piece of the puzzle to place. When I spoke to the bank, I had insisted on knowing where the funds were intended to go. The application had a section for disbursement instructions. Usually, for a home improvement loan, the money goes into the primary checking account. But this application was different. It requested a direct wire transfer to a business account. I pulled up the name I had scribbled on my notepad during the call. Sovereign Growth, LLC. It sounded impressive. It sounded corporate. I ran the name through the state business registry. It was a public database. Anyone could access it if they knew where to look. The search results populated. Sovereign Growth, LLC, incorporated 6 months ago. The registered agent address was a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over. I scrolled down to the section labeled Manager/Member. I expected to see Derek's name, or perhaps a shell company. I did not expect to see a woman's name. Elena Corvus. I stared at the name. It was not a contractor. It was not a roofer. It was not a pool installation company. I quickly ran a cross-reference search on social media. Elena Corvus. A profile popped up. She was young, perhaps 28. Her bio described her as a crypto enthusiast and lifestyle entrepreneur. My husband wasn't trying to steal $150,000 to fix the roof. He wasn't even trying to steal it to pay off gambling debts. He was trying to mortgage my home, the home I paid for, to funnel seed money into an investment scheme run by another woman. I closed the laptop. The anger I expected to feel was absent. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just leaving the marriage. He was trying to loot the building on his way out. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Evelyn, my lawyer. I have the evidence of attempted fraud, and I have a name. We are not just filing for divorce anymore. We are filing for damages. Upstairs. The shower was still running, masking the sound of a man who was drowning and didn't even know it yet. The vibration of my phone on the mahogany desk usually signaled a work emergency or another bill notification, given the week I had been having. I expected another attack from Derek's camp. Perhaps a cousin I had not spoken to in 3 years calling to tell me I was being unreasonable. But when I looked at the screen, the name displayed was Harper. Harper Vaughn, Derek's daughter, my stepdaughter. She was 21 years old, a senior at a university 2 hours away. I had come into her life when she was 9, a chaotic whirl of knobby knees and missing teeth. I had braided her hair before recitals. I had taught her how to parallel park. I had proofread her college essays. We had a relationship that existed in the quiet spaces between Derek's performative parenting. Her text was short, devoid of the emojis she usually used. I do not believe the things Dad is telling me. I want to hear it from you. Can we meet? I stared at the message. Derek had likely spun a tale of a mentally unstable, vindictive wife who was trying to ruin his life. He probably expected Harper to be his ultimate character witness, the innocent child caught in the crossfire. But Harper was an observer, much like me. I replied immediately, "Name the place." We met at a small coffee shop halfway between my office and her campus. It was raining again, a relentless drizzle that coated the windows in a blur of gray. Harper was sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked tired. She wore a sweatshirt I had bought her for Christmas, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. When I sat down, she did not smile. She looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly similar to her father's, but filled with a depth he never possessed. "He says you have lost your mind," Harper said. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "He says you are cutting off his money and trying to kick him out because of a midlife crisis. He told me you are making up stories about him being cold just to justify being cruel." I took a breath, the instinct to defend myself, to list my grievances, to lay out the timeline of my pain, was strong. But I knew that words were malleable. Derek was a master of words. I needed something harder than words. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the app for our home security system. The camera in the kitchen had a high-fidelity microphone. It recorded everything. I had saved the clip from that Tuesday night, not out of malice, but out of a professional habit of preserving data. "I am not going to tell you a story, Harper," I said softly. "I am just going to let you hear the truth." I placed the phone on the table between us and pressed play. The audio was crisp, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my footsteps, the rustle of fabric, and then Derek's voice, clear as a bell, dripping with that specific, icy disdain. "Don't touch me. I'm not playing husband tonight." Then my voice, quiet and resigned. "Then that is the most honest thing you have ever said." I stopped the recording. The silence at the table was heavier than the humid air outside. Harper stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Her face went pale. The narrative her father had built, the story of the crazy, demanding wife, evaporated in seconds. He said, Harper's voice trembled. He told me you tried to scratch him. He told me you were screaming. I have not raised my voice in 10 years. Harper, I said, you know that. She slumped back against the booth seat, looking suddenly very young. She ran a hand over her face. He isn't playing husband, she whispered, repeating the words. God, that is brutal. She looked out the window for a long time. I let her process it. I did not push. I sipped my black coffee and waited. When she turned back to me, there were tears in her eyes, but also a flash of anger. You know what he told me once? She asked. Last Thanksgiving, we were in the garage, and I asked him why he didn't get you a better anniversary gift. You had gotten him those golf clubs, and he got you a gift card. I remembered that anniversary. I had used the gift card to buy groceries. He told me, Eloise doesn't need romance. Harper, Eloise is a safe investment. The words hit me in the chest like a physical blow. A safe investment, not a partner, not a lover, not a soulmate, an asset, a bond that matured over time and paid dividends in stability and labor. He said, Harper continued, her voice gaining strength, that I should find a guy like you, someone who handles all the paperwork so I could just enjoy life. He bragged about it. Eloise, he bragged that he didn't even know the login to the mortgage portal because she handles the boring stuff. I nodded slowly. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt. It was the pain of a dislocated joint snapping back into place. It confirmed everything I had suspected. There is something else, Harper said. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. And I don't know if I should tell you, but if he is treating you like this, you need to know. Tell me, I said. He isn't going to work, Harper said. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaves every morning at 8. He leaves, Harper corrected. But he doesn't go to the firm. He lost his job 3 months ago. Eloise, they let him go. Restructuring. Or that is what he told me. He made me promise not to tell you. He said he didn't want you to worry, that he would find something else before you noticed. The world tilted on its axis, and then, suddenly, everything aligned. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a deafening click. 3 months of unemployment. He had been pretending to go to work to keep up appearances, to maintain the facade of the successful husband, but the severance package must have run out. The savings, what little he had of his own, were gone. That explained the panic. That explained why he was so desperate when I cut off the credit cards. He wasn't just annoyed at losing a luxury. He was terrified of losing his lifeline. He had no income, and that explained the fraudulent loan application. He needed $150,000 not to invest in a scam, but to backfill the hole he had dug, to buy into that sovereign growth scheme in a desperate Hail Mary attempt to make money quickly before I found out he was broke. He wasn't just a narcissist. He was a drowning man trying to climb onto my shoulders to keep his head above water, even if it meant pushing me under. Harper was crying now. Silent tears tracked down her cheeks. I am so sorry, she choked out. I should have told you. He is my dad. I didn't want to betray him. I reached across the table. I did not hug her. We were not a hugging family. Thanks to Derek, but I covered her hand with mine. My hand was steady. You have nothing to apologize for, I said firmly. You were being a loyal daughter. That is a virtue. Harper, do not let him take that from you. She gripped my hand tightly. I am so embarrassed, she said. He is lying to everyone, and you are just sitting here, taking it. You are the only person in that house who ever acted like real family. He treats us like audience members. You treated us like people. That sentence, you treated us like people, was the medal I would pin to my chest when this war was over. Listen to me, I said, my voice dropping to a serious register. I am going to end this. I am going to divorce him, and it is going to be ugly. There will be lawyers, and there will be forensic accountants. He is going to be angry. He is going to try to make you choose sides. I squeezed her hand. I am promising you right now. Harper, I will never ask you to choose. You are his daughter. You love him. You can keep loving him. I will not drag you into court. I will not put you on the stand. This is between me and him. Harper wiped her eyes with her sleeve. She looked at me, and I saw the woman she was becoming. She was strong, she was resilient, and she was done with the lies. You don't have to ask me to choose, she said, her voice steadying. I have ears. I heard the recording, and I know who has been paying my tuition when he forgot. I know who proofread my thesis. She took a deep breath. If you need the truth, Eloise, if you need someone to say that he is lying, you just ask. I am not going to let him gaslight you, not after everything you did for us. I sat back. I had walked into the cafe expecting a confrontation. I was walking out with an ally, and not just any ally, the one person Derek thought he owned completely. Thank you, I said. We finished our coffee in a companionable silence. When I walked back to my car, the rain did not feel gloomy. It felt like it was washing the streets clean. I had the recording, I had the financial records, and now I had the motive. Derek Vaughn had lost his job, lost his money, and tried to steal my home to cover his tracks. And he had done it all while telling me I was the one who was cold. I started the engine. It was time to go home and wait for the final act. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between a flyer for a lawn care service and a pre-approved credit card offer. It was nondescript, plain white, with no return address and no company logo. The only thing on the front was my name, written in a sharp, angular script that felt vaguely familiar, though I could not place it. Inside, there was a single sheet of heavy cream paper. The message was handwritten in black ink. Eloise, we need to talk, not about feelings, about the pattern. It was signed, Simone Hale. I stared at the name, Simone Hale, Derek's ex-wife, the woman he had described for 12 years as volatile, paranoid, and impossible to please, according to Derek. She was the villain of his first act, the reason he had been so guarded when we met. He had painted a portrait of a woman who was emotionally erratic and financially irresponsible, but the handwriting in front of me was not erratic. It was precise. It was controlled. And the word pattern sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I texted the number included at the bottom of the note. We agreed to meet that evening in Savannah, Georgia. It was a 2-hour drive, far enough away to ensure we would not run into anyone from our social circle. We chose a bar called the Gray Fox, a dimly lit establishment with high-backed leather booths and a hushed atmosphere that discouraged eavesdropping. I arrived 10 minutes early. I ordered a sparkling water and watched the door. When Simone walked in, she did not look like the monster Derek had described. She was elegant, perhaps 45 years old, wearing a tailored blazer that screamed professional success. She carried herself with the same rigid posture that I did, the posture of a woman who is used to holding up the sky. She slid into the booth opposite me. She did not offer a handshake. She simply placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. You look tired, Eloise, she said. Her voice was low and smoky, but not broken. That is good. He likes it when we are broken. I am not here to trade war stories. Simone, I said, keeping my guard up. You said you wanted to talk about a pattern. Simone signaled the waiter for a bourbon. Neat. Once the drink arrived, she took a slow sip and looked me dead in the eye. Let me guess, she said. He stopped touching you. Then he started picking fights about money. And then, one night, when you tried to reach out to him, he stepped back and said something very specific. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Did he say, "Don't touch me. I am not playing husband tonight"? The air left my lungs in a rush. I gripped my glass so hard my knuckles turned white. I had never told anyone those exact words. I had the recording, yes, but I had only played it for Harper. "How do you know that?" I whispered. "Because," Simone said, her lips curving into a bitter smile. "He said the exact same thing to me 15 years ago." She opened the manila envelope and spread a series of documents across the table. They were photocopies of old bank statements, loan agreements, and legal correspondence. "He has a script, Eloise," Simone said, tapping a finger on the table. "He does not just fall out of love. He enacts a withdrawal strategy. He convinces himself that marriage is a role he has been forced to play, a job he has been performing for an ungrateful boss. It justifies everything he does next." I looked down at the papers. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers. I saw a familiar sight. "Look at the signature," Simone said, pointing to a loan document dated 14 years prior. I looked. It was a signature for a personal loan of $20,000. It read, "Simone Hale," but the slant was wrong. The loops were too tight. "I didn't sign that," Simone said. "I found out about it 3 months into our divorce proceedings. He forged my signature to secure cash because he had blown his bonus on a sure-thing investment that tanked." She slid another paper toward me. "It was a transfer log. And here," she said, "look at where the money went." I followed her finger. The transfers were made to an entity called Apex Ventures. "Who is Apex Ventures?" I asked. "It was a shell company," Simone explained. "Run by a woman he met at a conference. He was funneling our joint assets into an account he thought I couldn't touch, hiding it under the guise of business expenses. He calls it protecting his capital. The law calls it embezzlement." The room seemed to spin. I thought I was dealing with a unique crisis, a singular betrayal born of a midlife breakdown. I was wrong. I was just the second season of a show that had been running for decades. "He is doing it again," I said, my voice steady despite the nausea rising in my throat. "He tried to take out a home equity line of credit in my name last week. He is moving money to a company called Sovereign Growth." Simone nodded grimly. "Of course he is. He is predictable. But that makes him dangerous. Eloise, because he has practiced this. He knows exactly how to manipulate the social narrative." She took another sip of bourbon. "Has he called his mother yet? Has he sent his best friend to tell you that you are destroying him?" "Yes," I said. "Marilyn came over with lasagna. Tate sent me a text accusing me of freezing him out." "Classic Derek," Simone muttered. "He creates a story where he is the victim of a cold. Controlling woman. He uses that story to pressure you into reconciling, or at least into letting your guard down, and while you are busy defending your reputation, he is busy draining the accounts." She reached across the table and placed a hand on my wrist. Her grip was firm. "You need to listen to me," she said. "You cannot just use a divorce lawyer. You need a forensic accountant. You need to freeze everything, not just the credit cards, but the retirement funds, the home equity, the life insurance policies. If there is $1 anywhere with his name attached to it, he will try to move it offshore or into crypto before the court order is signed." I looked at this woman, this volatile ex-wife who was currently saving my financial life. I felt a surge of gratitude, but also a sharp, piercing anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. The question came out harsher than I intended. "We have lived in the same city for 12 years. You saw me marry him. Why did you let me walk into the trap?" Simone pulled her hand back. For the first time, her composure cracked. She looked down at her drink, swirling the amber liquid. "Because I was ashamed," she said quietly. "I was a smart woman, Eloise. I was a CFO, and I let a man steal from me and gaslight me for 5 years. I didn't want to admit how blind I had been." She looked up, and her eyes were wet. And, partly because I hoped he had changed, I wanted to believe that maybe I was the problem. That maybe with the right woman, he would be the man he pretended to be. "I didn't want to ruin your happiness with my bitterness." She laughed, a dry, hollow sound. But people like Derek don't change. They just find new audiences. I gathered the papers she had brought. I organized them into a neat stack. "Thank you. Simone," I said, "you haven't ruined anything. You have just given me the map. Be careful," she warned as I stood up. When he realizes the charm isn't working and the victim act isn't working, he will get desperate. A desperate narcissist is a dangerous thing. I walked out of the bar and into the humid Savannah night. The air was thick with the smell of jasmine and impending rain. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the cobblestones. I unlocked the door and sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine immediately. I stared at the envelope in the passenger seat. I had driven down here thinking I was getting a divorce. I realize now that was a naive assessment. You divorce a husband. You do not divorce a predator. You investigate him. You build a case against him. And you prosecute him. Derek Vaughn wasn't just a bad husband. He was a recidivist. He was a con artist who used marriage licenses instead of ski masks. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I felt a cold, hard determination settle in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Simone. I was fighting for Harper. I was fighting to be the last woman he ever did this to. I pulled out of the parking lot and turned toward the highway. The investigation was officially open, and I had a 100-year lead on him. Derek realized his charm offensive had hit a wall, so he pivoted to the strategy of the pseudo-intellectual. He suggested therapy. He did not suggest it to save the marriage. Of course, he framed it as a mature, necessary step for closure. He stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with the weary posture of a martyr, and said we owed it to ourselves to have one session to unpack the toxicity. He wanted a witness. He wanted a professional to sit in a room and nod sympathetically while he explained how unreasonable I had become. I agreed immediately. Derek looked surprised by my compliance, but he did not know that I had selected the therapist. I did not choose a gentle counselor who specialized in communication styles and love languages. I chose Dr. Malcolm Reeve. Dr. Reeve was not a handholder. He was a forensic psychologist who specialized in high-conflict divorces and personality disorders. He was the man you hired when you wanted to dissect a dynamic, not heal it. The office was sterile. There were no soft throw pillows or inspirational posters about the journey of the soul. There were 3 leather chairs arranged in a precise triangle and a large clock on the wall that ticked with aggressive, rhythmic precision. Derek began the session exactly as I predicted. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, his hands clasped in a gesture of open supplication. He looked at Dr. Reeve with his most earnest expression, the one he used to close deals when he actually had a job. "I just feel," Derek started, his voice thick with carefully curated emotion, "that Eloise has checked out of this marriage. She has become incredibly controlling. She tracks my spending like a hawk. She cut off my access to our joint funds without a discussion. She locks doors in our own home. It feels like I'm living with a warden, not a wife. I am being punished, Doctor, and I do not even know what the crime is." He paused, waiting for Dr. Reeve to validate him. He expected a nod. He expected a question about how that made him feel. Dr. Reeve did not nod. He sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Derek behind rimless glasses. He made a single note on his yellow legal pad. "Controlling," Dr. Reeve repeated, "and punishment. Those are strong words. Derek." "They are the only words that fit," Derek insisted, emboldened. "She is cold. She refuses to engage. She has turned everything into a transaction. I try to reach out. I try to apologize for being stressed. And she just hands me a spreadsheet. She wants to win. She always has to be the one who is right." Dr. Reeve turned his gaze to me. "Eloise, your response?" I did not defend myself. I did not raise my voice to counter his accusations of coldness. I simply opened my leather portfolio. I took out 3 pieces of paper and placed them on the low table between us. "This," I said, pointing to the first document, "is a timeline of the last 3 months. It shows that while Derek claims I am controlling the finances, He has been unemployed for 90 days and did not inform me. This, I pointed to the second paper, is an email from our bank confirming a fraudulent application for a home equity line of credit, signed by someone claiming to be me, at a time when I was at work. Derek stiffened. His eyes darted from the paper to the door. And this, I said, placing the final sheet down, is a transcript of the last conversation we had before I moved into the guest room. I looked at Dr. Reeve. I reached out to him for comfort. He stepped back and said, quote, "Don't touch me. I am not playing husband tonight." End quote. I sat back. I am not punishing him. Doctor, I am simply believing him. The silence in the room was absolute. Derek opened his mouth to interrupt, to spin the narrative, to claim the bank email was a misunderstanding. But Dr. Reeve held up a hand. It was a sharp, commanding gesture that silenced Derek instantly. I am not interested in the bank error right now. Doctor, Reeve said. He looked at Derek with a gaze that was almost surgical. I am interested in the word playing, but before we unpack that, I have one question for you. Derek. Derek shifted in his seat. Okay. Why do you love her? The question hung in the air. It was simple. It was fundamental. And for a man like Derek, it was a trap. Excuse me? Derek blinked. Eloise, Doctor, Reeve said, gesturing to me. You say you want to save this marriage, or at least understand it. So tell me, specifically, what do you love about this woman? Derek laughed nervously. Well, that is an easy one. I love that we have built a life together. I love that she is stable. You know? She is incredibly organized. She handles things. I never have to worry about the details because Eloise is on top of it. She is smart. She is successful. She is reliable. Doctor. Reeve waited. Go on. She is a great planner, Derek continued, grasping at straws. She planned our entire renovation. She manages the investments. She is solid. She is a rock, Doctor. Reeve took off his glasses and set them on his notebook. Derek, you have listed a set of functions. You have described a property manager. You have described an accountant. You have described a personal assistant. He leaned forward. I asked you why you love your wife. You did not mention her humor. You did not mention her kindness. You did not mention her mind, her dreams, or the way she looks at you. You listed the services she provides for you. Derek's face turned a mottled red. You are twisting my words. I am talking about partnership. Marriage is a partnership. No, Doctor, Reeve corrected him. His voice dropped dead calm. Marriage is a partnership. This is a service contract, and you are angry because the service provider has gone on strike. That is not true, Derek snapped. The veneer of the calm, rational husband was cracking. His voice rose an octave. She makes me feel small. Okay? Is that what you want to hear? She walks around that house like she owns it, like she is the only one who matters because she brings in the big paycheck. She makes me feel useless. She does not make you feel useless, Derek. Doctor, Reeve said. The doctor waited until Derek looked him in the eye. You feel useless because you have spent 12 years living off her labor, her money, and her emotional energy. Yet you still expected to be worshipped as the head of the household. You feel useless because without her managing your existence, you are realizing that you have nothing of your own to offer. The words hit Derek like a physical slap. He sat there, his mouth slightly open, the air rushing out of his lungs. The truth had been spoken in a brightly lit room by a stranger. And there was nowhere to hide. He could not charm his way out of this. He could not manipulate the man who wrote the book on manipulation. Derek stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. This is bullshit, he spat out. He grabbed his jacket. I am not paying for this. You are a quack. She got to you first, didn't she? She spun her web. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the first time in our marriage he looked at me without a mask. There was no boredom, no feigned affection, just the rage of a parasite that had been detached from its host. "You are enjoying this," he hissed at me. "I am not enjoying it," I said calmly. "I am just documenting it." Derek turned and stormed out of the office. The heavy door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the small room. I sat alone with Dr. Reeve. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was the silence of a diagnosis confirmed. "Well, Doctor," Reeve said, picking up his pen and capping it, "I believe we have made significant progress today." "I believe we have," I agreed. "He will not return, Doctor," Reeve said. "He has been exposed. Now he will accelerate. He needs a new source of supply, and he needs to destroy the old one to justify his exit. You need to be ready." "I am ready," I said. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked out of the office and into the parking lot. My hands were steady. My heart was beating with a slow, powerful rhythm. The ambiguity was gone. The gaslighting was over. I knew exactly who I was sleeping next to, or rather, who I was locking out of my room. And for the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The private war was over. It was time to take this public. The Westmark Integrity Group annual gala was an exercise in corporate theater. It was held in the ballroom of the city's oldest hotel, a space dripping with crystal chandeliers and the heavy scent of expensive lilies. I had been invited not just as an attendee, but as a guest of honor. I had just closed the largest audit in the company's history, recovering nearly $4 million in misappropriated funds for a logistics client. Tonight, I was not the invisible wife managing a household. I was Eloise Gray, the woman who could find a needle in a haystack of digital transactions. I arrived alone. For 12 years, I had walked into rooms like this with Derek attached to my arm. I had spent 12 years managing his social anxiety, laughing at his repetitive jokes to make him feel witty, and ensuring his glass was never empty but never too full. I had been his handler. Tonight, walking through the gilded doors in a midnight blue gown that I had bought with my own separate money, I felt a strange sensation. It was weightlessness. I did not have to scan the room to see who he was charming. I did not have to worry if he was feeling insecure because someone else was the center of attention. I was just me. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations from senior partners. I held a glass of champagne that I had no intention of finishing. I felt powerful. I felt calm. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It was a subtle change, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. I saw heads turning near the entrance. I saw a ripple of whispers. And then I saw him. Derek stood at the top of the staircase. He was wearing his tuxedo, the one I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. He looked impeccable. He had the smile plastered on his face, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes just enough to suggest warmth without actually conveying it. He was playing the role of the proud, supportive husband. He was crashing my moment. He descended the stairs and began working the room. I watched him move. He shook hands with my boss. He laughed with the CFO. He was weaving a narrative with every handshake, likely telling them how proud he was of his girl, positioning himself as the bedrock of my success. It was sickening. He spotted me near the ice sculpture. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, the mask slipped, revealing the desperation underneath. But he recovered instantly. He glided toward me, parting the crowd like a ship cutting through water. "Eloise," he said, loud enough for the circle of colleagues around me to hear. He reached out and placed a hand on the small of my back. It felt like a branding iron. "You look stunning, darling. I was worried you had forgotten to save a dance for me." I did not flinch. I did not step away. I simply turned my head and looked at him. "I did not forget anything. Derek, I simply did not invite you." He leaned in close, his lips brushing my ear. To the room, it looked like an intimate whisper between lovers. "Don't embarrass me," he hissed. "Everyone is watching. Play along, or I will make a scene that will ruin your little night of glory." I took a sip of my champagne. You have already embarrassed yourself by showing up where you are not wanted, I replied, my voice steady. But go ahead, make a scene. I deal with fraud for a living. I am very comfortable with public exposure. He pulled back, his smile tightening. He realized that the threat of social awkwardness no longer held power over me. So, he switched tactics. He decided to go for the money. He had heard rumors. There had been talk in the industry that my recent success came with a substantial performance bonus. Derek, in his unemployment-induced panic, had clearly latched onto this rumor as his salvation. I heard about the promotion, he said, keeping his voice low but changing the subject. And the bonus, that is fantastic news. Really, but under state law, income earned while we are still married is considered community property, even if you are hiding it in a new account. He was trying to provoke me. He wanted me to snap. He wanted me to deny it or admit it, either of which would give him leverage. He wanted me to say, "It is my money," so he could turn to the crowd and say, "See, she is hiding assets." I looked at him with genuine pity. He was so small. He was so predictable. "Derek," I said, and I pitched my voice just loud enough to carry to the 3 people standing nearest to us, my boss and 2 senior partners. "I am not hiding anything. My finances are an open book." I took a step closer to him, invading his personal space. "But since we are discussing financial transparency in public," I said, "do you want to talk about the loan application submitted last week? The one with the signature that looks remarkably like mine, but was signed while I was in a compliance meeting?" The color drained from his face. It was immediate. One moment he was flushed with the heat of the room and the alcohol. The next, he was as pale as the napkins on the bar. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at my boss, who was now watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. He looked at the partners. He realized that I hadn't just accused him of being a bad husband. I had accused him of a felony in front of the most powerful people in my industry. I don't know what you are talking about," he stammered, his charm disintegrating into a puddle of sweat. "I think you do," I said pleasantly. "And I think the bank does too." He looked like he was about to run, or perhaps scream, when a movement to my left caught his eye. Harper stepped out of the crowd. She was wearing a simple black dress, standing tall and poised. She did not look like a child anymore. She walked over and stood directly next to me. She did not look at her father. She looked at the crowd, then she looked at me, and finally, she turned her gaze to him. She did not say a word. She did not have to. By standing at my shoulder, she was making a declaration louder than any scream. She was the character witness he had counted on, and she had just defected to the prosecution. Derek looked at his daughter. He looked at the wife he had tried to break, and he realized he was standing alone in a room full of people. The isolation was absolute. "Harper," he choked out, "what are you doing?" "I am enjoying the gala." "Dad," she said. Her voice was cool, detached. "Eloise invited me." He looked between us, his eyes darting back and forth. The narrative of the victimized father and the crazy wife had just been destroyed by the visual evidence of his own daughter choosing the crazy wife. He backed away. He actually took a step back, bumping into a waiter holding a tray of empty glasses. The glass clattered, drawing more attention to his retreat. He muttered something incoherent, turned on his heel, and walked fast toward the exit. He did not look back. He fled the scene of the crime. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My boss, a man of few words, raised his glass to me. "Everything all right, Eloise?" he asked. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Just taking out the trash." I excused myself and walked out to the terrace. The night air was cool and crisp against my skin. I walked to the stone railing and looked out over the city lights. I felt a vibration in my clutch. I pulled out my phone. It was a text message from the bank's fraud investigation unit. "Ms. Gray, we have completed our preliminary review of the loan documents and the branch security footage. We have confirmed that the individual in the video is not you. We have flagged the activity as criminal fraud. A detective from the Financial Crimes Division will be contacting you shortly to take a formal statement. I stared at the screen. The final piece of the trap had snapped shut. It was no longer a divorce proceeding, it was a criminal investigation. I looked back at the ballroom, where Harper was talking to one of my colleagues. I looked at the city below. Derek had told me he wasn't playing husband. He was right. He had been playing a criminal, and he had just forgotten the first rule of the con: never try to hustle the person who audits the books. I put the phone back in my bag. I was ready for the end. The filing of the divorce papers was not a dramatic event. There was no screaming match on the front lawn, no throwing of clothes from a second-story window. It was a purely administrative procedure, handled with the same clinical efficiency I applied to a corporate audit. On Monday morning, I submitted the petition for the dissolution of marriage. On Monday afternoon, I handed a sealed packet of evidence to the district attorney's office regarding the fraudulent loan application. I did not do this out of spite. I did it because in my world, when you find a discrepancy, you report it. You do not let the error compound. The forensic accountant I had hired, a man named Mr. Henderson who wore bow ties and terrified people with his calculator, found the final pieces of the puzzle within 48 hours. Derek had been busy. In the days following our separation, he had attempted to siphon off the last of our joint liquid assets. He had made 3 transfers totaling $12,000 to a shell account connected to the woman from the LLC. He was trying to hide the money before the court could freeze the assets. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was faster than the system. He was wrong. The showdown happened in a mediation room 3 weeks later. It was a long table made of polished oak, the kind used to intimidate people into settling for less than they deserve. Derek sat on one side, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he chased ambulances for sport. I sat on the other side with Evelyn and a stack of files. Derek looked terrible. The charm was gone, replaced by the haggard look of a man who was realizing that consequences were real. But his lawyer started strong. "My client," the lawyer began, leaning back in his chair, "is the victim of systematic financial abuse. Ms. Gray has controlled all access to marital funds. She has monitored his spending, cut off his credit cards, and used money as a tool of coercion. We are asking for spousal support, 50% of all assets, and damages for emotional distress." Evelyn looked at me. I nodded. "That is an interesting narrative," Evelyn said calmly. "But it relies on the assumption that the assets in question are community property." Derek's lawyer scoffed. "It is a 12-year marriage in a community property state. Of course it is community property." I reached into my file and pulled out a single document. It was yellowed slightly with age. I slid it across the table. "Do you recognize this signature?" "Derek?" I asked. Derek squinted at the paper. Then his eyes widened. It was a document we had signed 8 years ago. We were at a New Year's Eve party hosted by one of his wealthy friends. Derek had been drunk on champagne and the high of being in a room with powerful people. I had brought the document, a post-nuptial agreement protecting my future earnings and inheritances, because I had just received my first major promotion and wanted to secure my portfolio. I had asked him to sign it so we could update our trust. He had laughed, called me his little planner, and signed it without reading a single word. He had signed it because he thought I was soft. He thought I was just doing busy work. He never imagined I would actually enforce it. That is not valid," Derek stammered. "I didn't know what I was signing." "The notary was present," Evelyn pointed out, "and you are a college-educated man. Failure to read a contract is not a defense against its enforcement." Derek's lawyer went pale. He whispered something furious into Derek's ear. "Furthermore," I continued, ignoring the whisper campaign, "regarding the accusation of financial abuse, I did not cut Derek off from his money. I removed his access to my money, and while we are discussing abuse, I would like to submit the police report regarding the identity theft and bank fraud committed against me last week." I slid the second file across the table. The surveillance photos from the bank, the handwriting analysis, the loan application. "My client is prepared to press charges," Evelyn said, "unless, Of course, Mr. Vaughn would like to sign the divorce settlement as written today. 0 spousal support, 0 claim on the retirement accounts, and he assumes full liability for his own legal fees. The room went silent. Derek looked at the papers. He looked at me. Then, he did the only thing he had left. He started to cry. It was a pathetic, wet sound. He reached across the table, ignoring his lawyer. "Elle, please," he sobbed. "I am sorry. I was desperate. I lost my job. I was scared. We can fix this. I will go to therapy. I will do whatever you want. Don't ruin me. I love you." I looked at him. I looked at the tears streaming down his face. 10 years ago. Those tears would have broken me. I would have rushed to comfort him. I would have written a check to fix his mess. But today, I just saw a man who missed his credit limit. "You do not love me, Derek," I said. "You love the safety net, and the net is gone." Before he could launch into another monologue, the door opened. Harper walked in. She had asked to be there. She stood at the end of the table, her hands clasped in front of her. "Harper?" Derek wiped his eyes, looking hopeful. "Honey, tell her. Tell her we are a family." Harper looked at her father. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. "You told me Eloise was a safe investment, Dad," she said. The room seemed to drop in temperature. "You told me you didn't have to worry about money because she handled the boring stuff. You hid your unemployment from us for 3 months while she paid for my tuition. That is not family. That is using people." Derek slumped in his chair. It was the final nail. His own daughter had dismantled his character in 2 sentences. The mediation ended 20 minutes later. The prenup was upheld. My assets were preserved. Derek signed the papers with a shaking hand. He walked out of that room with nothing but his clothes and a looming criminal investigation for bank fraud. But I had one last piece of business. I waited for Harper in the hallway. She looked exhausted, the weight of betraying her father heavy on her shoulders. "You did the right thing," I told her. "It feels terrible," she admitted. "The truth often does," I said. I handed her a thick envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "It is a trust fund," I explained. "I set it up this morning. It covers your remaining tuition, your graduate school if you choose to go, and a down payment on a starter home. It is fully paid for." Harper stared at me. "Eloise, I can't take this. Not with everything happening with Dad. It is your money." "Exactly," I said. "It is my money, and I am choosing to invest it in someone who actually has value. You are family. Harper, that does not change just because I am divorcing your father. A piece of paper didn't make me care about you, and a piece of paper won't stop me." She hugged me then, right there in the sterile hallway of the law firm. It was a real hug. It was warm. It was the only hug in 12 years that didn't feel like a transaction. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new apartment. It was on the top floor of a building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. The walls were white. The floors were bare oak. There were no pictures of Derek. There were no souvenirs from trips where we pretended to be happy. I sat on the floor with a glass of wine, looking at the empty space. It did not feel lonely. It felt full. It was full of possibility. It was full of silence that I didn't have to fill with someone else's ego. I had spent 12 years managing risk, calculating the odds, and trying to prevent disaster. I had failed to see that the disaster was sleeping in my bed. But I had fixed it. I had balanced the books. I took a sip of wine and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The moment you said you weren't playing husband was the moment I stopped playing savior, and that was the day I started to live. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need to hear it.